The world didn't know it was about to witness its first millennial saint when Carlo Acutis drew his first breath on May 3, 1991, in London's bustling heart. But the universe held its breath anyway, as if sensing that something extraordinary had just entered the stage of human history. This wasn't just another birth announcement in the London Times. This was the arrival of a soul destined to bridge two worlds that had never been connected before: the ancient realm of mystical faith, and the emerging digital frontier that would soon consume humanity's attention. His parents, Andrea and Antonia, were successful Italian professionals living the cosmopolitan dream in London's financial district. They had wealth, sophistication, and all the trappings of modern success. Yet from the moment Carlo opened his eyes, something indefinable shifted in their perfectly ordered world. Neighbors would later whisper about the inexplicable sense of peace that seemed to emanate from their apartment, as if the very air had been blessed by an invisible presence that defied rational explanation. When Carlo was still learning to walk, the family relocated to Milan, Italy's economic powerhouse and fashion capital. The city's blend of ancient cathedrals and cutting-edge technology would prove to be the perfect laboratory for a child who would one day revolutionize how humanity understood the intersection of the sacred and the digital. Milan's streets hummed with the energy of progress, but Carlo seemed attuned to something deeper, a frequency that most adults had forgotten how to hear. The first signs of Carlo's extraordinary spiritual hunger appeared before he could even properly articulate what he was experiencing. While other toddlers were captivated by toys and cartoons, Carlo was drawn to churches with an intensity that puzzled his initially non-practicing parents. He would stand transfixed before statues and altars, his young eyes reflecting a depth of understanding that seemed impossible for someone who hadn't yet celebrated his third birthday. Antonia would find him in their apartment's small prayer corner, not playing, but in what could only be described as contemplation, a 3-year-old lost in thoughts that belonged to mystics and saints. The mystery deepened when Carlo began expressing an inexplicable devotion to the Virgin Mary. Without any formal religious instruction, he would speak of the beautiful lady, with a familiarity that suggested a relationship none of the adults around him could comprehend. His childish drawings weren't of superheroes or cartoon characters, but of angels and crosses, rendered with an artistic sensitivity that spoke of inspiration beyond his years. His parents watched with growing amazement as their son seemed to navigate an invisible spiritual landscape with the confidence of someone who had been there before. But Carlo wasn't destined to be a withdrawn mystic hermit. As he grew, a fascinating paradox emerged that would define his entire short life. While his soul reached toward the eternal, his mind was absolutely captivated by the digital revolution unfolding around him. The early 1990s were witnessing the birth of personal computing and the Internet, and Carlo absorbed these technological marvels with the same intensity he brought to his spiritual pursuits. His small hands moved across computer keyboards with surprising dexterity, as if he instinctively understood that these glowing screens would become his primary tools for evangelization. The pivotal moment came when Carlo was 7 years old, during his first Holy Communion preparation at the parish of Santa Maria Segreta in Milan. While other children approached the sacrament as another milestone to cross off their childhood checklist, Carlo experienced something that would literally reshape the trajectory of his existence. The first time he received the Eucharist, witnesses described a transformation that was both subtle and profound. His face radiated a joy that seemed to come from another dimension, and his entire posture changed, as if he had just encountered the most important person in the universe. From that moment forward, Carlo's life revolved around what he called his appointment with Jesus. Every single day, without exception, he insisted on attending Mass and receiving Holy Communion. This wasn't religious obligation or parental pressure. This was a love affair that transcended every other interest in his young life. He spoke of Jesus in the Eucharist not as a distant theological concept, but as his best friend, his confidant, his daily encounter with the divine that made everything else in life make sense. The intensity of Carlo's Eucharistic devotion began to worry some family members and teachers. Here was a boy who could discuss the latest computer programs and video games with sophisticated understanding, yet he spoke about the real presence of Christ with a conviction that made adults uncomfortable. He wasn't performing religious theater. He was living in a reality where the supernatural was as tangible as the keyboard beneath his fingers or the Milan skyline outside his bedroom window. What made Carlo's spiritual life even more remarkable was how seamlessly it integrated with his growing technological expertise. While other children his age were using computers for games and entertainment, Carlo began exploring how digital platforms could serve a higher purpose. He started creating simple websites and digital presentations about saints and religious topics, displaying an intuitive understanding that technology wasn't humanity's enemy, but potentially its greatest tool for spreading truth and beauty across the world. Teachers at the Jesuit school of San Carlo noticed that Carlo possessed an unusual combination of intellectual gifts. He excelled in mathematics and science, showing particular aptitude for computer programming and web design. Yet he approached these subjects not as ends in themselves, but as means to a greater mission that was already crystallizing in his young mind. He spoke with startling clarity about his desire to use technology to help people understand the beauty of the Catholic faith, especially the miraculous reality of the Eucharist. The wrestling match between ordinary teenage life and extraordinary calling became increasingly apparent as Carlo entered his preteen years. He genuinely enjoyed sports, particularly soccer, and had close friendships with classmates who knew nothing of his intense spiritual life. He could laugh at jokes, get excited about video games, and experience all the normal emotions of adolescence. Yet underneath this seemingly typical exterior, something unprecedented was building, a mission that would soon consume every waking moment and ultimately define his legacy for generations to come. By the time Carlo turned 11, the stakes of his existence had become clear to anyone paying close attention. This wasn't just a particularly devout Catholic child going through a phase of religious enthusiasm. This was a soul on fire with a specific purpose that seemed to transcend the boundaries of normal human experience. His conversations about the Eucharist carried the weight of personal revelation, as if he had been granted insights into mysteries that had puzzled theologians for centuries. The convergence of his technological genius and mystical understanding was beginning to produce something the world had never seen before. Carlo wasn't just another computer-literate teenager, and he wasn't just another young person with strong religious faith. He was becoming something entirely new, a digital prophet who understood that the future of evangelization would be written in code and transmitted through fiber optic cables to screens that would shape the consciousness of entire generations. The awakening was complete. The boy who would become the patron saint of the internet had discovered his calling. All that remained was the question of whether he would have enough time to complete the mission that was burning within him, a mission that would require racing against a deadline he couldn't yet see, but somehow already knew was approaching faster than anyone imagined. Carlo Acutis is born in London, 1991, to successful Italian parents who relocate to Milan. From early childhood, he shows extraordinary spiritual hunger and mystical devotion to the Virgin Mary. At age 7, his first communion becomes a transformative encounter that makes daily Mass essential to his life. Simultaneously, he develops remarkable computer skills, instinctively understanding that technology will be his tool for evangelization. The stakes: a child's soul wrestling between normal teenage life and an extraordinary divine calling. Carlo becomes obsessed with documenting Eucharistic miracles from around the world, spending countless hours researching historical and contemporary supernatural events. He begins building a revolutionary website cataloging these divine interventions while maintaining his normal school and social life. His mission intensifies as he battles skepticism from adults who can't understand his passion. The stakes: racing against an unknown deadline to spread his message about the reality of Christ's presence in the Eucharist. The programmer St. Carlo masters advanced web design and programming, creating digital platforms that showcase the beauty of Catholic faith. He lives the paradox of a tech-savvy teenager with the spiritual discipline of a medieval mystic: daily Mass, prayer, and fasting combined with cutting-edge digital innovation. He prophetically understands how social media will shape future generations. The stakes: using his finite time to create an infinite digital legacy that will outlive him. At age 15, Carlo is diagnosed with acute leukemia. Instead of despair, He experiences supernatural peace and intensifies his mission work. During his final weeks, he races to complete his comprehensive Eucharistic miracle exhibition while his body weakens. He offers his suffering for the Church and continues programming until the very end. The stakes: a teenager's desperate race against cancer to finish his divine assignment before death claims him. Carlo dies on October 12, 2006, but his influence explodes globally. Miraculous healings are attributed to his intercession, and his website reaches millions worldwide. Pope Francis beatifies him in 2020, recognizing him as the first millennial blessed. His incorrupt body and ongoing miracles confirm his sanctity. The stakes: how one teenager's brief life continues transforming souls across the digital universe, making him the patron saint of the internet generation. A 15-year-old computer genius who used technology to evangelize the world about Eucharistic miracles, becoming the first millennial saint and proving that holiness can flourish in the digital age.